breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, a £20,000 reward for the terror suspect that's still on the run. But the focus now has turned to the prison. Overpopulated, understaffed, that is the allegation. So I'm wondering, do we invest in our prisons properly? And according to a study, Britain is one of the least work-orientated countries in the world. Apparently, only 70% of us regard work as an important part of life. And what? Is that a problem? I don't know. You tell me. And I'm asking, are we being manipulated when it comes to the way the media reports climate change? That is an allegation that's been made by a leading climate scientist. But is it right? And 1 year anniversary of us losing our beloved Queen. We'll reflect on that and look at the state of the monarchy now. We've got it all to come and more. But before we get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Our top stories. The Met Police has confirmed a sighting of escaped prisoner Daniel Khalif. He was last seen near Wandsworth Roundabout, walking towards the town centre. They're offering a £20,000 reward for information that leads to his arrest. They also released images of the chef's uniform that he escaped in. Commander Dominic Murphy is head of the Met's Counter-Terrorism Command. He's urging Khalif to give himself up.
My message to Daniel is to give himself up. We will be closing in on you. The public are motivated and trying to find you. We've had excellent support from the media. It's only a matter of time before we find you, and I would appeal to you to call us and we will come and get you, or go into your nearest police station and we will detain you.
2 Channel migrants who attacked police on a French beach have been jailed. 33-year-old Salih Taib Abdullah and 25-year-old Ahmed Omar Saleh Qatar were sentenced to 2 years and 2 months for attempting to arrive in the UK illegally. The pair were part of a violent group who confronted officers near Calais as they attempted to stop them launching a small boat. A grand jury in the United States is recommending charges be brought against 3 Republican senators over their alleged efforts to reverse the result of the 2020 election. They say Georgia's 2 senators at the time, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, should be charged, along with Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. So far, 19 people, including former President Trump, have been indicted. Explosive experts have closed the Channel Tunnel after a suspicious vehicle was stopped. Police say the incident is not linked to the search for terror suspect Daniel Khalif. Security services have been carrying out stricter checks in a bid to find him. The British Army has been called in to inspect the vehicle, the latest incident causing more travel delays for motorists at the terminal in Folkestone. Gun salutes have been fired in London to mark the first anniversary of the late Queen's death and the King's accession to the throne. They were held in Hyde Park and at the Tower of London, with soldiers and horses who took part in the state funeral procession returning for those gun salutes in the King's honour. Charles and Camilla attended a private service of prayer this morning in the church near Balmoral, where the late Queen worshipped. The King also recorded a special audio message in memory of his mother.
In marking the first anniversary of Her late Majesty's death and my accession, we recall with great affection her long life, devoted service, and all she meant to so many of us. I am deeply...
Well, meanwhile, in an exclusive interview with GB News, former Prime Minister Liz Truss revealed details of her meeting with the Queen 2 days before she died.
The meeting at Balmoral, she was absolutely on top of what was happening. She was very, very keen to reassure me that we'd be meeting again soon. The assumption absolutely was that this would be the first of many meetings.
The Prime Minister says a free trade deal with India is not a given and not top of his agenda ahead of the G20 summit in Delhi. Rishi Sunak is expected to encourage India's PM, Narendra Modi, to end his policy of neutrality to Russia. He'll also urge world leaders to address the war in Ukraine. He's refused to commit to having a trade agreement in place before the next election.
It's vital that the UK has a close relationship with India, particularly a close economic relationship. But when it comes to trade deals, I always said that it would be good to have an ambitious and comprehensive trade deal with India for all those reasons, but we can't rush it, and I won't rush it. I've always said I want to take the time to get trade deals right so that they work for the British people, they work for the UK, and lots of progress has been made on this one, but we're not there yet, so we've got to keep going.
Network Rail has been fined £6.7 million after admitting to a number of safety failings that resulted in 3 people being killed in a crash in Aberdeenshire. A train driver, a conductor and a passenger died when a train was derailed near Stonehaven because of heavy rain and a landslide in 2020. The fine was reduced from £10 million because the operator pleaded guilty to maintenance failures and accepted that it didn't warn the driver or tell him to slow down. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's get back to Michelle.
Thanks for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me. Daniel Moylan, a Tory peer in the House of Lords, and Laurie Laybourne, a policy researcher. Good evening, gentlemen. Nice to see you again. Michelle. I've not seen you for a little while. You know the drill as well, don't you? It's not just about us three. It's very much about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. Email is gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Now, the big top story, of course, we've just been hearing in the bulletin there. The Met Police have confirmed now the first official sighting of the escaped terror suspect Daniel Khalifi. Witness apparently saw the guy jump from a van, or come out, should I say, from under a van at Wandsworth roundabout. £20,000 reward for information is offered, of course, by the police. I just have to chip in with my 2 pence worth. This is I happen to know, for various reasons, the area incredibly well. Wandsworth roundabout is heaving, to put it mildly. It's just to give you a little bit of context. You've got a McDonald's on one side of the roundabout, you've got a huge underpass on the other, massive residential development. It's about, I don't know, 1 minute from the River Thames if you wanted to walk that way. You've got a big, massive Wandsworth Bridge, which is currently closed. It's been closed, or it will be closed for 10 weeks. You've got a park on the roundabout, a children's playground on the roundabout. You've got a train station, restaurants, cafes, you name it. It is a very busy location. So I'm astonished that if he did come out from under that van there, I'm astonished that there's not been more sightings of him.
Well, I can't explain that, Michelle.
And yeah, I don't know why I'm looking at
I don't know why.
I want you to say.
I mean, I agree with you. It's a busy roundabout, but maybe it's the case that if you want to do something funny, the best place to do it was when you're surrounded by lots of people, and not in some isolated spot where any random passing would notice you.
But I can't help but reflect, because I don't know about you, and I know it might be a bit of an odd mindset, but I do kind of put myself in the mind, try and put myself in the mind of this person. And I think if I was going to come out from underneath a van, I think I would like to do it down a side, quiet street, as opposed to in full view. So I don't know, sometimes I think maybe I should have been a detective in a former life or something.
I've seen some weird stuff in Wandsworth, though.
Oh, have you?
Yeah. I mean, no one, coming out from under a van, but you blend into the crowd, get on with your day. Someone noticed.
Well, yeah, but I'm just astonished that there's only one, and I'm also astonished as to why you would just...
How did he know it was Wandsworth? I don't want to make... but how did he know it was Wandsworth roundabout if he's under a van?
Because...
I mean, how would you know?
You see, I spend way too much time thinking about this kind of stuff, I do confess. But this escape, surely this guy has been planning this for a long time. You don't just wake up one morning and think, delivery van, I'm going to attach myself to the undercarriage of that, and off I go. Surely you will have planned... If I was going to escape prison, I'd have spent weeks and months planning this thing. I would know every twist and turn on the road. I would know what was going on. Anyway,
yeah,
I tell you what...
You'd also know which way exactly the lorry was going to be driving.
Yes.
You'd know what its route was, and you'd be looking out for that McDonald's from under the lorry.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Maybe he just wanted, because at that time in the morning they're still doing their breakfast menu. And who does not love a sausage and egg McMuffin with a hash brown? Anyway, shall I just get on and talk about the real point of the story?
The other thing that he would have planned, or he would have noticed as part of his plan, is that there's a loss of about 30% of staff.
Well, yes, this was the point that I was going to come on to before I got distracted by putting myself in the mind of an escaped convict. Is the fact that there's been huge criticism, right? What they're saying is that this prison was hugely overpopulated, it was massively understaffed, and of course, Rishi Sunak, I mean, he gets the blame for everything, quite frankly, so now his defo is going to get the blame for this. But are we investing in our prisons?
Yes. I mean, that's a general
that's the end of that debate, then, everyone.
Yeah,
should we just go to the break? I'm only teasing. Go on.
But that's a general situation in the country, right? Primary school roofs are falling in. Prisons have not got enough staff to make sure that prisoners aren't escaping. You know, the list goes on and on and on. So we are suffering now from years and years of underinvestment. Anyone knows who owns a business, if you underinvest, it leads to consequences. Anyone knows who lives in a house, if you underinvest in it, you get bad consequences. The same thing is happening now, and the prison service is one of those pressure points where the failure to invest is leading to big problems like prisoners escaping.
Well, I'm going to say something unpopular.
What?
I'm going to say that I think we send people to prison, too many people to prison, and we send them for far too long.
Oh, Daniel.
And it doesn't do any good. And then when we find the prisons are heaving with people, like we've got 3,000 IPP prisoners in jail at the moment who shouldn't even be there, and that's out of 80,000. That's quite a significant chunk of the estate. And they shouldn't even be there because those prison sentences have been found to be illegal. And we send people to jail, and everyone is demanding longer and longer sentences, like it was America. You know, we'll be up to the 150-year sentence before we know where we are. And that's a big change in our sentencing policy over the last 30 or 40 years. And has it done us any good? It's certainly filled the prisons up. It's certainly made them harder to manage. And it certainly means that we are, we're seeing the problems we're seeing. I'm not saying one escape. I mean, in any prison system, somebody will escape from time to time. And you can't have 100% total success in keeping people locked up. I remember some big escapes from when I was young. So somebody will escape. It's wrong. We normally do catch them when somebody escapes. I don't put too much weight on that. But the fact is, We don't want to pay for the prison system we have, and we don't want to say, but we do want to say, lock them up, longer, longer, longer. So we've got to make a decision, which is it going to be? Do you want to pay for that or not?
Yeah, I'm happy to pay for that.
Yeah.
I'm happy to pay for...
I knew you would be.
Yeah,
I did say to the producer, you know, Michelle and I won't agree on this.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to pay a little bit more tax if you could guarantee me that what you're going to do is invest it in law and order, in particular in taking people off the streets that, quite frankly, have got no business being there because they don't know how to behave when they're on them. These IPPs that you mentioned, we debated that the other day, and a few people were not happy with me. Someone was watching, actually, that is connected to an IPP. I think she was a family member or something, and they reached out to me on Twitter and said, Michelle, you need to get in touch with us, and, you know, we're going to talk to you about the miscarriage of justice. So, you know what, you've just prompted me. I must take them up on that offer because I should. I'd be fascinated, actually, to learn a little bit more about that. Just to give you some stats before I go, 86,000 prisoners. Of course, you won't be surprised to know that they are mainly men. The most popular age category for being in prison is 30 to 39-year-olds. You've got some people in there over the age of 70. Apparently, in the year 2021 to 2022, there was 54 prisoners released in error, which caught my eye. I think, how on earth do you release somebody accidentally? What's that all about? About 23,000 prison staff in post at the moment. Apparently 14.1 days was the average working days that were lost to sick. And I'll tell you what I found quite interesting. In fact, actually, I'll turn this way to you, Laurie. Life after prison. These are the government's prison stats. Life after prison. Only 4% of prisons achieve their target for employment at 6 weeks following release. And get this, only 17% of prisons accommodate a target for accommodation for first night release. So you're out of prison night number one. Have these people got somewhere to go?
So I think this links to Daniel's point. I agree with him about how we shouldn't have as many people being put into jail necessarily in the first instance.
Why?
I think that it would be a big mistake if we are moving towards America, and in some ways I think it does feel like that. Because there are... Now, let's be very clear. That doesn't mean a blanket policy of saying, oh, well, we need to suppress numbers. It means being very clear about specific areas of crime and understanding if jail is the best and first thing to be done to deal with that crime, to deliver justice, and also to hopefully rehabilitate. So this is those stats that you just read out to me there. If we've got the problem of putting people into jail, we then also got the problem of what happens when they come out of it as well. And that's another problem with rehabilitation. And so I genuinely agree with what Daniel's saying. There needs to be a better process where we think, let's strip it right back. People have committed crimes. There are a multitude of crimes with different levels of severity. We need to deliver justice. And we also want to rehabilitate these people so they can be functional and useful back in society as well. And that sometimes means that they probably shouldn't even go to jail.
But I believe in prevention, really. So, yes, rehabilitation, yeah, lovely, sweet word. Let's all hug prisoners and high-five them and all the rest of it. Wonderful. But I would like, actually, to be tougher in the first instance, particularly on, like, minor crimes and things like that, because I think, actually, if you have a zero-tolerance, no-nonsense approach to the smaller things in life, you might actually find that you then prevent people from going on and committing the more serious crimes that would see them locked up for longer and all the rest of it later on down the line. But there is a soft bone in my body, Daniel, because I do believe that once you've served your time and all the rest of it, I would like you, and I think it's better for the general public if you are reintegrated into society, particularly into work. And I think there is a stigma around employing people with a criminal record. And I think it's made very hard for people that have got a criminal record to actually get into employment. Is that right, do you think?
Yeah, it is. And there's at least one high street chain which is associated with a charity which deliberately sets out to employ people.
Timpsons.
Yeah, which employ, exactly.
Fabulous, they're fabulous.
To employ people who've come out of prison. And perhaps there should be more of that. And that is a really good thing for people to do. But I will just say generally, if you want to train somebody for employment and help them to be a well-integrated member of society, you will not achieve that in prison. That is a very, very strange way of going about that task.
But that's why I said in step one, I believe in working prevention.
You lock them up for 30 years or whatever it is, 20 years, with a whole load of people who we know, and especially you put people in for short sentences, we know that all they do is it makes them more criminally minded. They get exposed to more criminal people. Even the terrorists get exposed to more...
on the streets and
even the terrorists
and
I'm not saying we shouldn't lock up
then.
dangerous terrorists, but even the terrorists just get exposed to more terrorism. And then you say, now we would like you to come out and be... We'd now like you to come out and train to be a lathe turner or something, you know, and be a nice, respectable member of society. It's a very odd way of going about it. We've got it all wrong.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. You guys can
You also got to remember, prison is quite a modern idea. It's a very Enlightenment, late 18th century idea. People were never locked up before then.
But what did they used to do with them before then?
They either hanged them for stealing sheep, or they branded them, or they fined them, or they cut something off.
Put them in the stocks.
Putting them in the stocks. But prison is a very deliberate and conscious invention of a bunch of liberals like Jeremy Bentham in the very late 18th, early 19th century. And we've had 200 years of it now as a means of part of our criminal justice system. And it's not now working, it ceased to work. I'll say one other thing, talking about long sentences, very, really quickly. You go back to the time when we had hanging for murder, OK? A lot of people who were found guilty of murder they were all sentenced to be hanged in court, but many of them were then, it was remitted to a sentence in jail. The Home Secretary intervened and they were let off the sentence. Do you know how long, on average, people served for murder if they weren't actually hanged?
How?
Mostly they were out in 10 years.
Right.
This idea that you're in jail for 30, 40 years...
Every day's a school day with Lord Moylan, isn't it? I love it.
You're in jail for 30 or 40 years. Most of them, if they weren't hanged, they'd be sent to jail at Her Majesty's pleasure, His Majesty's whatever pleasure, and then most of them would be out within 10 years or so.
Wow.
And because they were judged not to be that dangerous.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'm just harsh. My experience comes all the way back to when I was a teenager. I used to live a very different life to the life I lead now, Laurie, I'll tell you. Right. And I spent my weekends was in and out of prison visiting my then partner. He was in and out of prison like a yo-yo, so he was. And I've got to say, I think he quite liked it in there. All of his mates was in there. He used to get fed and watered. He used to go to the gym and all the rest of it. And I never used to feel like he used to come out and be punished. Although he probably came home to me, that was probably punishment enough. But anyway, that is probably where some of my sentiment comes from. Let me know, do you think we send enough people to prison, too many? Where do you stand on it? Few of you getting into that escape story as well. Good. I thought I was the only one out there that has actually thought through all of the nuances about escaping from prison. It seems that I'm not good. That reassures me. Anyway, lots to come your way. I want to talk to you about climate. Are we being manipulated with when it comes to what the media presents when it comes to climate change? And also, we don't seem to be very work-orientated in this country. Apparently, only 70% of us think that work is an important part of life. Are you one of them? If not, why not? See you in 2.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
News.
Or 10 years.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. The voice that you can hear chirping away in the background there whilst I was doing my introduction is Daniel Moylan, the Tory peer in the House of Lords. He's reading out to me a viewer comment as to why I'm all wrong, basically, on the prisons. Alongside him, Laurie Laybourne, a policy researcher, keeps us company as well. Richard, we're talking about the escaped convict. Richard says, surely there must be dash cam footage of his escape. Yes, Richard, this is what I'm saying. The Wandsworth roundabout is really, really busy. It's not just a random roundabout in the middle of nowhere. It's really busy. Anyway, Clive says Daniel is correct. We send our convicts to jail for far too long. It should be hard labour as a deterrent. He goes on to say, lots of people questioning why this fellow was in Wandsworth prison in the first place. Ron says we should build more prisons, employ more staff and lock up all the wrong-uns. Challenge is, though, Ron, there'll be a big debate about what classifies as a wrong-un in this day and age. Yeah, Ian says we should have capital punishment. That would fix the population problem within the prisons. But Max says if you do the crime, you should be prepared to do the time, but only if you are indeed a risk to the general public. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in about when it comes to prisons and who should be in them and whether or not, as well, you think we underinvest in them. Get in touch and let me know. But let's talk the world of work, because apparently less than 1 in 4 people in this country think that their career should come first in life. This is according to a new study. It basically says that Britain is one of the least kind of work-orientated countries in the world. 73% of Brits have named work an important part of their life. But get this, when you compare it to Italy, which was 96, and France, which was 94. I've got to say, when I read that statement, you know, does work come first in life? I think it'd be a little bit, how do I word this nicely? I think it'd be a bit sad, actually, if your answer to that was yes. Because what about your family? What about, I don't know, whatever. But anyway, what do you make to it all?
I agree with that a bit. I think a number of things have changed over recent decades. One is that maybe work was something that was much more connected to community. There's a big difference between, say, work, I use kind of cliched image here, but like work in a coal mine with the community that sprung up around it, and then being in an Amazon warehouse. There are differences there when it comes to the meaning you get out of life. And then for a number of people, in the past, work often, or for a period of time, meant a home, certain quality of life, leisure time, for example. Not for everyone, but for many. And as time has gone on, the quality of work has declined. It's become more precarious. It's become less well paid for some. And I think then it's harder to make that connection between work and then what value it's bringing for your life. And I think inevitably that means that people start to see it more sceptically, or at least see it more in proportion to other things in their lives. And I think COVID would have helped in that as well, with people having to slow down, those who could work from home, for example. I think one element amongst what is a very complex picture is that it may have had them rethink some of their priorities in life as well. And I'm sure that's another factor. But work has changed hugely in recent decades.
Well, Val says, yes, the work ethic is because of the welfare state. Val says that has caused the value of no working. Anyway, Daniel, your thoughts?
Well, I generally agree that, you know, we work to live, not live to work, and that people shouldn't be told you've got to work for the good of the economy. I mean, that's Stalin would have said that. You've all got to work for the good of the economy, and you've got no say in the matter. But we do have a say in the matter because we live in a free country. But there are other things. If you're going to spend so many years...
Are you telling me you think that you should be able to choose to live off benefits then?
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all. I'm going to come to that. But the first thing is, if you're going to spend decades now telling people that what's really important is their work-life balance, eventually they'll start listening to you. And they'll actually say, yeah, work isn't that important, my life balance is a bit more important. So that's what we're seeing. And the other thing is, of course, as I've said before, I said last week in your show, in a humane society, people who can't work can't be left in destitution, they've got to be supported. But if you make it too easy for people to live off benefits and they choose not to work when they could, that is, I think, a mistake. And getting that balance right is important. And there's been quite a lot of that going on as well. So, but I don't think you should be saying, you know, you can't be bully pulpiting people and saying, you've got to work for the good of the economy. People should be working for their own good and for the good of their families and for supporting themselves, and not working beyond what they don't want to work once they've satisfied those demands.
What about universal basic income? Would you support something like that?
I think we need to do more trials to see what effect it has. That is something that's happening all over the world, and some of those trials look to be positive. Some of the shorter working week trials look to be positive as well. I think these are interesting concepts that, as I say, need more experimentation, fitting with the way that Daniel is interpreting the issue here, that there are certain needs and wants we have in our lives, and work provides us the ability to do that. And then getting the balance right is something that hopefully we could be equipped with more of a choice to have. Personally, I would be more interested in having what I would describe as universal, or what others have described as universal basic services that provide certain things like transport and education. We already, of course, get elements of those things now, which would then reduce some of those other pressures to then
But what does that mean, universal basic transport?
So that, for example, if you're living in a city, the transport is much cheaper or maybe even free, so that there's less of that impetus. If you're a low-paid worker, a lot of your wages begin to disappear on your commute, for example.
Well,
so
luckily for us, we have a man that knows a thing or two about transport on the panel.
I know a thing or two about transport.
So you're saying that low-paid workers, you're not saying that a proportion of their wages per day are not eaten up by their commute?
The weekly bus pass in London is one of the cheapest forms of travel that actually exists. And low-paid workers make heavy use of the bus. They don't, on the whole, travel on the tube. And they have, I think it's about 24 quid a week. I might be slightly out of date. And the whole fare structure in London is tailored to help people at different points without giving away too much free to those who can pay. Yeah. And actually, you know, it is not the case.
I don't live in London, and that's not the case for people outside of London.
I know it's not the case. I don't know what about London. I used to be in charge of transport in London. Okay? So I'd said in London, it is the case, that is the case. In other parts of the country, you have problems about the extent of public transport. It's another matter. You're not going to replicate London in the rest of the country. So you can have your free transport. There just won't be any buses. They'll be free,
you get a free bus pass, don't you, when you get to...
You get a free bus pass when you get to...
It's
about 67 now.
Yeah, 60, 65, 67.
The government did this recently.
What else would you give for free then? So they've got free bus...
I'm not...
about free food.
Oh, yeah,
food is... What about free M&S? I mean...
So it's very easy to commit the fallacy of saying, because I'm suggesting making transport cheaper for people, that we'll give up on free food. It's very easy to do that.
Food is a more basic requirement than
transport. So recently the government reduced bus fare journeys, I don't know about London, I don't live in London, to £2 maximum per bus journey. That made a vast difference to the people I talk to and spend time with where I live. Before, right, for a 10-minute bus journey to get into the local city, it was costing people £5.80 for a single, right? You're doubling up, you're putting that over the course of the week. If you're working as a cleaner on low wages, that is a non-trivial knock out of your pay. I'm not saying I would love it if those buses were free. Just them being £2 made a world of difference. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. We're talking here about work, and if we have certain services that help people so that work can be a bit more of a balanced quantity element in their lives so they can get more out of their lives, I cannot imagine why we would talk down to that idea. We've got to make it easy for people to get to work so they can then do that for what they need in their lives.
Well, there you go. What do you make to that? Tell you what else you could get to work on your push bike. After all, the sun has been shining, hasn't it? Nice little cycle to work on your agenda or not? Let's look at the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. For most of us, the hot spell continues this weekend, but with an increasing chance of seeing some big thunderstorms. And eventually it will turn cooler into next week as this cold front approaches. But for the time being, we're between high pressure and low pressure, and we still have the hot air in place. A balmy evening out there. One or two very isolated thundery showers across parts of the west, but the vast majority staying dry. We'll turn a little murky in places, a bit misty, particularly around the coasts through the west, and it's going to be a very warm night as well. Temperatures holding up in towns and cities in the mid to high teens. Some spots may not drop below 20 Celsius, so a very warm start to what will be a hot Saturday. The main exception will be the far northwest, where it will be distinctly cooler than today. And as the day goes on, there is an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms breaking out across the heart of the country. Now, if we see these downpours, they could cause some problems. There is a Met Office warning in place, but they're going to be very hit and miss. Most places won't see them. Temperatures again getting into the 30s, but as I said, quite a bit cooler across the northwest of Scotland, where there will be more cloud and outbreaks of rain. Still a few thunderstorms rumbling on through the night, and into Sunday, a greater chance of seeing more of these downpours. Parts of northern England, North Wales, maybe into southern Scotland with a chance of thunderstorms, but even further south we could import some from France. Again, the majority won't see them, and again, for most, another hot one.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, there you go, bright sunshine, I hope, wherever you are. But someone got in touch with me last night and said, Michelle, stop going on about the fact that you're celebrating it's warm. You were pointing out to me there's a whole load of you watching this that absolutely cannot bear the heat and are struggling to get to sleep at night and all the rest of it. You asked me to give you a shout out and I forgot your name, but I will give you a shout out nonetheless. But just remind me of your name, Joe, about that last survey there when it's saying that Brits are not as work orientated as the Italians and the French. You're a cynic, Joe, because he says he thinks what it's more likely is that us Brits are just more likely to tell the truth. I don't know. I'll leave it with you to figure out. I want to talk climate change next. When it comes to the media and the way that they report climate change, do you think we might be manipulated a little bit? You tell me.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, the Queen remembered a year on, plus reflections from top royal biographer Tom Bower. My Mark Meets guest is celebrity chef Anthony Worrell Thompson. And in my take at 10, the Cold War between Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby is heating up. I'll be dealing with these privileged prima donnas in no uncertain terms. A jam-packed, unmissable show tonight. We're live from 9.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Daniel Moylan, the Tory peer in the House of Lords, alongside me, as is Laurie Labourne, a policy researcher. Now, a leading climate scientist, Dr. Patrick Brown, he reckons that he deliberately overhyped the impacts of global warming when it comes to wildfires in his recent work. It was all about basically trying to make sure that he got it published in what is regarded as quite a prestigious journal. He says, basically, that there is a kind of a central narrative that must be followed by main publications in this field in order to be published, respected and certainly funded in the area of climate change. He reckons essentially that we are being manipulated. So when you hear about all these wildfires and you see all this footage of all these fires absolutely everywhere, the devastation that it's caused and all the rest of it, the only thing you ever hear about is climate, climate, climate. You don't then hear the flip side, which is absolutely climate is more than likely a factor, but as is the fact that there was a load of randoms that have gone out and set fire to these forests and all the rest of it in the first place, and lots of them end up getting arrested. So what he's saying is that bits have been edited out. Is he accurate or not?
Before we talk about him, let's talk about wildfires. So to say that climate change has caused a wildfire is a pretty hard thing to say. To say that climate change is increasing the risk of wildfires because it's basically making things warmer and drier is the right way to think about it. What that means is in certain places, if there is arson or there's trash lying around with a glass bottle or whatever, there's more like places of tinderbox, it's more likely to go up, right? So that's the first thing to say. There are loads of complex factors that sit behind it. As climate change gets worse, the risks grow. It's a risk factor. It's a driver of risk in the same way that if you didn't look after yourself, it would be a driver of potentially bad health. In the specific, this is quite a niche debate going on here with this one guy. He's essentially whistleblowed on himself for putting in a paper where he said, look, I think there's this narrative and therefore I had to dress up my paper in a certain way. Now, when you submit to any journal, particularly a prestigious journal, you have to go through this thing called peer review, where your paper is then read by anonymous reviewers who are experts in the field. Those anonymous reviewers, it has subsequently turned out, said, excuse me, this paper, you isolate the climate change element, but what about all the other factors? And in his reply, he said, well, ignore those. I just want to focus on the climate change one here. And part of me thinks, yeah, that's kind of fair enough, because, again, to take the health analogy, if we think there's something wrong with someone's body. We want to isolate the particular...
But you must have noticed yourself, just watching media, just as a casual observer, never mind some of the work you do, just watching it as a casual observer, you must have noticed yourself that the talk is all around global boiling. Your weather maps are like fluorescent, you know, bright red. People talking about essentially dying, being boiled in their own sweat. You know, this is the kind of messaging that we get all the time, and we don't really hear frequently from mainstream media sources about the fact that actually 79 arrests over there for arson and wildfires caused by arson over there. You don't get that.
So I genuinely agree. So I have huge respect for journalists, obviously. I think sometimes they struggle with the complexities that sit behind climate change. I have family in Greece.
Come on. You don't need to understand the complexities that sit behind climate change to know the fact that 79 people have been arrested for setting fire to forests.
And that's not what I'm saying. Like, I would like it if a headline about climate change and wildfires said, there are an array of complex factors that lead to wildfires. Climate change is one of the leading causes that increases the risk.
Well, I would like the headlines to say arsonists set fire to forests. Moral of the story,
But they're easy to set
don't
fire
be an
to.
arsonist.
It's easy to set fire to.
Well, there are two separate things here, I think. The first is, are we, the public, being manipulated about climate change? And I think the truth is you only have to turn on certain, what I would call mainstream television channels that I wouldn't want to mention here, in order to see that, you know, every story practically is angled towards climate change and is presented as an inevitable consequence of climate change and a precursor of much worse things to come, even when there are other factors, and it's quite deliberate. And I think it's so blatant and so obvious, people are starting to laugh at it now. And it's certainly not, I think it's ceasing to have the effect that the propagandists behind it are promoting. But it's absolutely clear that is happening. The second thing is something I know less about, but one hears stories about, which is the corruption of the academic establishment. And now, I don't know about this particular individual guy, how he wrote his paper, what he wrote it for. I don't know about the peer review. But the suggestion that in order to get funding, in order to get academic progression and career progression, you need to follow a certain narrative about climate, about carbon in particular, and so on. One hears that all the time, and it's very worrying, because it's when you get a clampdown on dissentient voices that science goes right off the rails. And, you know, that's what worries me about the whole thing.
This has gone on for a long time, though, because I can remember, I must have been vaguely a teenager there or thereabouts, and I remember being terrified, having the life terrified out of me about don't use hairspray, because all these aerosols was going to burn this massive hole in the ozone layer. Then I remember being terrified about acid rain. I think it was acid rain that was the next thing. And now it's all about you shouldn't eat meat, you can't drive these cars, you can't put your log burner on. You know, if you don't adhere to what we tell you to do, you could potentially be in prison or get £15,000 fines and all the rest of it. So I do feel like there has always been this kind of...
I'm old enough to remember when The Economist had an impending ice age on the front cover every week, practically. We were going to have a huge ice age sometime in the 1990s. We'd all freeze to death.
Yeah, I mean, that was wrong. And the temperature is going up, and that's what's
wrong.
happened. What the temperature is going up,
it's wrong.
It's literally what has happened.
Well, is the temperature going up? You know, people want to argue about the science. Is the temperature going up? Are
the
there
instrumental
more,
record
Are there
goes back
more
hundreds of
wildfires?
So
are
again,
there more wildfires?
So
than
let me
used to be?
Let me say this.
You will know this.
So I do research on climate-related things. The places I look the most above what we're describing here as mainstream media, which I would include GBNews in, but mainstream media and other places, right, are not the sources I look at, because they're the interpretation within the lens of your political view and so on and so forth. I look at reports that are released by the US Department of Defense. I look at the recent US government's what they call an intelligence estimate, which looks at threats to the US. And they have a great phrase for what climate change is: a threat multiplier. These are not... You're going to describe four-star generals in the US as wokies and stuff. These are very sensible people that are identifying threats to the US nation around the world. And climate change is a threat multiplier. It makes already bad things more risky. Places are dry and prone to wildfires if you go and commit arson, like Greece, where I have family. And if it's even windier and drier and warmer, which is what's happening in Greece, then when that person goes and commits arson because they want to burn down a bit of forest, they can build a house or get some insurance money, it will make the likelihood that that fire spreads even greater. It multiplies an existing threat. That is what the climate crisis is at the end of the day.
Well, there you go. Final word on that to the climate expert, but I will throw it open to you at home as well. What do you make to it all? Have you changed your behaviour in recent years? I'd be fascinated to hear that as well. Do you take less flights? Do you eat less meat? Do you have your log burner on less if you've got one? Would you change your car and all the rest of it? Do you change your life in order to try and help the planet to survive for longer? Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. When we come back, I'll be bringing in some of your thoughts. The emails have been on fire, so they have, speaking about fires and boiling. Lots of you getting in touch. I'll be sharing some of your views in a second. But also, of course, we will reflect on Queen Elizabeth a year ago. Goodness me, since her passing. Don't go anywhere and I'll see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, this is Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping me company till 7, Daniel Moylan, the Tory peer in the House of Lords, and Laurie Laybourne, a policy researcher. You know the drill, date on a Friday, Dewberry Tavern is open, but today marks the first anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's death. Of course, she passed away 70 years on from being on our throne. I just want to press pause and actually raise a glass to our late Queen. I remember that day. I cannot to Queen Elizabeth. I remember that day. I love the fact that you got up. I did contemplate, shall I stand up? But as you can see, I've got my heels on, I've got my bag on. I should have been more respectful, really, and stood up whilst I did my toast.
You're our queen,
anyway,
Michelle, you're our queen.
To our queen. I can remember that day. And I have to say, of course, you know, she was getting on in her age. So when someone gets on in their age, you always know that something's coming. But I remember being so shocked. I don't know why. It just really stunned me and it took me aback. And I remember leaving here and feeling just so sad. And I remember being really surprised at my own reaction just by how sad I actually was. I can't believe it is a year ago. And I think for me personally, it surprised me just how much the Queen meant to me. And I think I only really realised that when she passed away.
In a world that's constantly shifting in some cases horrifying ways, to have had the continuity of the presence of the Queen was, I think, a huge part of our lives that we only really realised properly a year ago when she was no longer with us. And I had a similar reaction that you're describing there. And I think it was that so much is shifting in the world, but there was this constant that has then disappeared. And I also personally had really appreciated the connection to the past, to the country. There was so much I learned about the world through the lens of learning about the Queen. And I thought then the resultant spectacle of the funeral was an astonishing reminder of tradition, of the past of this country.
Daniel?
I think there are two things that strike me. The first was the lying in state and the queue, the people and how many came and how well behaved they were and how solemn their attitude was. And it showed that there was something special about her, but also, in a sense, it was special about us, that we could respond in that way. And I thought that was absolutely impressive. The other thing is that you come away, whenever you think about the Queen, the late Queen, you think, how did she manage to do it? How did she manage for 70 years, and longer than 70 years, because she was a model princess? I mean, how did she manage to be so perfect at what she was doing with hardly ever a step wrong? Who could do that? And what was the magic? Magic's the wrong word because it suggests it's like oofle dust. But what was the sort of the elements in her character that kept her on that right track with a profound sense of duty and responsibility that was never about herself? It was always about looking out and doing something for other people. How was it that she managed to do that for so long and never really put a foot, or very rarely put a foot wrong?
Yeah, Kirk.
And I still don't have an answer to that a year later.
Well, Kirk says Her late Majesty served all of the people of the UK with immense dignity, seeking to keep us all unified through very unstable times. Adrian, I think you tap into something important. What you're saying is, of course, Her Majesty is such a big miss, but also it makes me feel and think about my mum, my dad and my sister, all the loved ones that were no longer with us. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right, because I think it did. It made you press pause. And he says, God bless Your Majesty. I think that is a sentiment echoed by many, many of my viewers, and certainly us guys here on the panel today. But look, that's all we've got time for. Laurie, thank you for your company. Daniel Moylan, thank you to you for yours too.
Thank you, Michelle.
And very importantly, thank you to each and every one of you at home, whether you're listening or watching or wherever you are. Thank you for your company. I very much appreciate it. Do not go anywhere. Lee Anderson up next. Night.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. For most of us, the hot spell continues this weekend, but with an increasing chance of seeing some big thunderstorms. And eventually it will turn cooler into next week as this cold front approaches. But for the time being, we're between high pressure and low pressure, and we still have the hot air in place. A balmy evening out there. One or two very isolated thundery showers across parts of the west, but the vast majority staying dry. We'll turn a little murky in places, a bit misty, particularly around the coasts through the west, and it's going to be a very warm night as well. Temperatures holding up in towns and cities in the mid to high teens. Some spots may not drop below 20 Celsius, so a very warm start to what will be a hot Saturday. The main exception will be the far northwest, where it will be distinctly cooler than today. And as the day goes on, there is an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms breaking out across the heart of the country. Now, if we see these downpours, they could cause some problems. There is a Met Office warning in place, but they're going to be very hit and miss. Most places won't see them. Temperatures again getting into the 30s, but as I said, quite a bit cooler across the northwest of Scotland, where there will be more cloud and outbreaks of rain. Still a few thunderstorms rumbling on through the night, and into Sunday, a greater chance of seeing more of these downpours. Parts of northern England, North Wales, maybe into southern Scotland with a chance of thunderstorms, but even further south we could import some from France. Again, the majority won't see them, and again, for most, another hot one.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you